Happy Halloween, everyone. I'll say, Halloween is one of my favorite times of the year. I can't eat candy, and I don't like going to parties, but something about the vibe of autumn in general. I always think of orange, yellow, red, brown trees, with a gray sky in the back. Those desktop backgrounds I used to always set. It's comfy. There's been a big influence in Plastern from Bot Sound being this planet of orange and purples. I mean, hell, there's pumpkins. I once heard someone say that something about the air during autumn just feels different. And maybe that's just some random psychological BS. Seasons are just a simple concept. It's not like suddenly we enter a different world because we entered autumn. Those are just organizational terms. I mean, hell, for half the world it's not even autumn right now. Yet, a part of me still believes that there's something mystical, special about this time of year. I always look back fondly on the work I do during this month, such as my horror Doom wads or even the Saturn Quest video. I just love this month and I just love this season. And for the topics of today, y'all are gonna need to open the mind to the weird and mystical. I guess this is a pretty weird ass way to celebrate Halloween. I don't know, maybe one of these years I'll show up in like a sexy witch costume. That'd be pretty cool. This has always been a fun but sentimental time of year for me. Something about the sun feels real now. Lying down in a field of brown leaves while the sun fades. Just close my eyes and let the sunbeams take me. Life is still hell, but maybe this time of year, the flames feel more warm than painful. This video could have been titled a lot of different things. It's going to be a very weird, messy video of me just talking about random stuff. So if that sounds nice to y'all, well, feel free to get cozy and spend Halloween with little old me. To anyone new here, I'm not sure what to say, but get ready for some weird stuff. Okay? Let's begin. Video games were so much more mysterious back then. When we were young, when they were new. Just these incredible worlds. We didn't know the limits. We didn't understand how it all worked. So moments where these games stopped working were shocking. We overestimated games, what they could do. I never thought of the limitations that cartridges would have, because I didn't think they were any. Games were capable of lasting forever in my mind. And with no social media and data miners combing the files, it really was a personal experience. Sitting down, playing a game, and seeing with friends if anyone else had heard or played the game, or if they encountered the same things that I did. And being told of incredible things in these games encountered by other people. There was such a mysterious wonder to it all. It really was a brand new world. Going out to some sale to find a cartridge with no package because nobody kept that crap. And just buying this game with no knowledge of what would happen when I put it into my console and flipped the switch. Good games? Bad games? That didn't matter. All I cared for was what was going to happen when I put that cartridge into the console. The world that I was about to experience. But it also scared me. To the point where even nowadays, there's a sort of trigger I have when games do certain things. Fears that rose from the result of games that still messes me up to this day. And that's what I want to talk about today. So get ready for a packed video of glitches, stories, mysteries, and fading memories from a monster that feels like it's starting to lose the ability to look back. So, let's do this. Where to start? I think one aspect that helped make video games more mysterious back then was not the games themselves, but the world. Yeah, baby, we spreading misinformation. We're talking hoaxes. Back then, get ready to hear that phrase a lot, but back then, everything about a game wasn't known or data mined or leaked. All we had were stories between friends. Everyone had their own hoaxes. Some were taken from more popular ones on the web, some were exclusive to that person. Y'all have probably heard of these, like unlocking secret characters, levels, cheat codes that do all sorts of exciting things. Just tales of encountering these wild occurrences in video games, cool secrets to discover, but always with some whack-ass requirement, like beat the game 25 times without taking damage or something. It always had to be absurd, but realistic enough to make sense. And even though these were fake, it was kinda cool in the aspect of giving people a journey to go on, a goal. I was thinking about how much stuff like that gives people purpose, and makes things exciting and fun. Even if the challenge was ultimately pointless, it was exhilarating to get there, and it will at least make a funny story later on. People still talk about hoaxes to this day, and the ones that they were told growing up. Hell, even I used to spread video game hoaxes to people. I get that some people might do it to make themselves seem cool, like, oh, you didn't get to see Samus fully naked? Well, that's because you need to beat the game 69 times in 15 minutes, no damage. Like, yeah, we get it, you're a gamer, excellent. But I would just do it because it sounded cool. It was fun to talk about all these things as if they were real, because just the idea ruled. Like, yeah, I was totally playing as Sonic in Melee. Let's boot up Cruel Melee and see if we can beat 20 wireframes. It was just fun to talk about and speculate these things and what they would look like, seeing the person you're talking to's face like light up in reaction. In some ways, games were like that. We didn't know everything about the game, so stuff we see and experience can be things potentially nobody else has, and stuff that seemed like rumors and hoaxes could be completely real. The kind of cool stuff that would probably be slapped on the back of a game box now. It's just how unlocked culture was back then. Games always gave the player new and cool things, sometimes at a cost of absurd tasks. And a lot of the time, we never knew what we needed to do in order to accomplish these requirements, or the idea that they were even in the game to begin with. It was a different age where there wasn't a billion games out that I was aware of and could buy, so I had to make my time spent with every game count. Extra shoutouts to those people who made images and videos of hoax in action to make it seem more believable. I think this is just such a fun part of video games that have been lost and will never come back. Like just going down rabbit holes of stuff like how to revive Aerith in Final Fantasy VII and hearing all these theories and fake images and videos, it's just so cool. It's like an alternate world that we're peeking in. I just feel like there's more of an understanding of rules and expectations when it comes to games now. But I guess the neat thing about this all is knowing that it's a hoax. It's cool to see ROM hacking really pick up on this, sometimes implementing these hoaxes as a reality. I love ROM hacks, and I wish I talked about them more on this channel, but there's always a weird impliance that I'd have to talk about the base game too, because the video assumes that y'all have played the original game, and I guess this is all off topic, but I really wanted to do a video on Final Fantasy VI T Edition and Brave New World, which are like very big mods for that game, but I feel like I'd have to talk about Final Fantasy VI too. But I don't know, I feel like with more popular games it's not that necessary. Like I didn't need to do it when I did Super Mario RPG Armageddon, but this is off topic, but hey, if there's any video to be off topic, it's this one. But it's always surreal to play a ROM hack of an older game and see new areas, new characters. In some odd ways, playing some of these ROM hacks have painted over memories of the original game for me. I'll play the vanilla game, go to an area and be like, oh, I thought something was here, but it's only in the ROM hack. But yeah, hoax culture was interesting. I think a lot more people were open-minded on what games could hold. It seemed like anything was possible. And if anything, revisiting a game they liked for a fun little challenge wasn't half bad. We live in a lot more skeptical age now, but for a bit, maybe it was just cooler to believe and get excited when your friend told y'all about being able to play as Goku in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Naked. I feel like you always gotta add the naked part to the hoax to make it seem more mysterious. But I know what y'all are thinking, Spacey, this video isn't scary, it's Halloween, dumbass. And so true, based, on God, no cap, no gown. But okay, I get it. Let's get a bit more serious. Personal. This was just the starting course, but now things are about to get juicy, I guess. I don't know. It's now I want to tell y'all about what scares me in video games. Fears that developed while playing video games that have kind of traumatized me in the weirdest way. This is going to be a really strange part of the video, but I think it's intriguing. I have a very odd worldview. It's not often I hear about people who have developed real-world fears based off experiences they had when they were younger in video games, but I've heard of some people with water fears stemming from this. But allow me to shed light on my game experiences and things that left an impact on me. I have two big fears for very different reasons. Let's start with 2D games. It's hard to explain the feeling. I grew up a lot on 2D games, sprites, Super Nintendo, NES, all that. Like, these are what games looked like to me. And when I was younger, these games are all I had. So I guess I formed a sort of relationship with this kind of art style. So whenever I play sprite games with horrifying sprites, it kinda gets to me. I guess to people, newer horror games with realistic graphics are scary because it's real, right? Well, I played these games so much growing up that I'm familiar with them. This is what real is to me. This is what my reality looked like back then. In a way, I have a sort of strange relationship with these old style games. It's like they turned me into a kid again. And back then, horror pixel games weren't really a big thing, and if they were, they didn't come out where I was from. Like, I was shocked when I first watched someone playing Splatterhouse. And I don't think it was just a blood thing, because I thought Mortal Kombat was cool. I mean, I grew up on the Super Nintendo ones, and the first game had like sweat, not blood. Yeah, nice, but the sequels had blood. When Mortal Kombat, it was portrayed in the context of cool. But when games are outright horror with the intention of harming via scaring people, even if the idea of horror is a positive, exhilarating experience, it was just the idea of horror media that shocked me, I suppose. I never watched movies growing up. Even now I don't watch movies. So just something about a game feeling malicious has some sort of effect on me. It's like meeting a friend, and they're trying to kill me. This is probably why I enjoyed Creepypasta a lot back then to an extent, and that these goofy ass stories actually affected me in some way. But that's spoiling a later section of this video. A lot of different small things about older games scared me. Like, I'd have to boot up the game to remember. And getting footage for this video, things did come back. A quick spark to the noggin when I load these games up, like, oh yeah, I remember this. Like the intro of Super Ghouls and Ghosts. Just the music as it zooms in on this castle when the princess gets kidnapped. Though honestly nowadays I'm like, damn, you single? Kidnap me too, please? Another one I remembered was the Mortal Kombat intro that got me, but that was just a more traditional loud sound, scary thing shows up. I can't remember, but Doom on Super Nintendo probably got me too. Probably for the same reason of Super Ghouls and Ghosts, being this first person point of view kind of game, and just seeing enemies and objects in the distance getting closer. Like, that's an actual fear of mine. Things far away slowly getting closer kind of gets me. I'm not sure why, I'll talk about it later. But just the idea of FPS games sounds like something that would have messed me up. And no, I'm not going to show footage of Doom on SNES. It's not healthy to look at. I guess what I'm saying is that anything can be scary to anyone, which really comes into the next point, which I think is really interesting. So, 3D games don't scare me, right? Only 2D games. Well, I never said that, at least not in this video. Y'all gotta keep in mind I'm like a different person every day. But a lot of 3D horror games don't typically scare me. Like, I somewhat remember my first playthrough of Dead Space, and that was just an action game to me. Y'all wanna know what 3D games scare me? what I think of when it comes to 3D horror.
It's me, Mario!
Please don't click off this video, just hear me out. I have the faintest memory, which is surprising. My memory isn't so much a blur, rather than short roads with massive roadblocks in between void space. But always remember, it was Christmas. There was a deep yellow glow as I held a copy of Mario Kart 64. I think that was my first real 3D game. And I don't remember anything else, but I think I picked Wario first. There's always a part of me that thinks of Mario Kart 64 and Christmas. It was like being in an isolated snow globe, in my own world, unbeknownst to all the horrible things around me, just sitting with that cartridge in my hands. Anyways, 3D games were like a whole nother world when it came to video games. Like, some of y'all weren't there to experience the impact, but it was shocking. It was the future. It was new. It was weird. It legit scared me. I thought games were limitless before, but now? Early 3D video games are some of the most beautiful, yet frightening games I've ever played. And even though I love them, I feel like it left some sort of mark on me. This stuff was mind-blowing, but the atmosphere created by some of these games was something else. Something unique. That I feel like few games could capture. And I know I'm sounding like one of those pretentious goofies that call Super Mario 64 the best horror game ever made. But let me get to the point. I think one of the things about these games that still get me to this day, an everlasting fear that I can't understand, is this. Did y'all see it? Because this is what scarred me. This is why 3D games scare me, and this is the effect they had on me. Something about looking off in the distance and just seeing this voidful blue. Even when I play these games now, I still sometimes glance over at this and just become transfixed, staring at the screen. And the absolute emotional spike when I fall off in these games and get enveloped by this void, it fucks with me. Like, when this happens, I can legit feel myself begging just to cut to the game over screen or something. Because something about falling down and seeing this, I don't know why, it just tears me up on the inside. But it's also just so entrancing. Even when there's things, it's the illusion of a world that has an impact on me. Like these background objects, those aren't real. Somebody put them there. And I'm not talking about the creators of the game. I'm thinking in universe. They were placed there to give the illusion of life. It's like that one area in Yumituki, and it feels like I'm trapped in some sort of testing lab. And I think that just goes to show my kind of close relationships with games. That there's a part of me that can lose it to such silly ideas. And maybe specifically it's the deep blue, whether it be the skies or the ocean. It just makes me feel vulnerable. Isn't that so weird? Just any void-like spaces in games, which gets combined with a future point I plan on bringing up soon. There was definitely more with early 3D games, like in general fogginess. I can admit that I also have a fear of long, infinite roads. I think of that moment in Sonic Adventure 2 with the car level ending, where I'm just in anticipation of it ending, like something bad is going to happen to me on this empty road. Like, it scares me. And this game came out way later from what I'm talking about now. I was probably already affected with this strange fear beforehand. It's just the idea of this repetitious, fake, long road with something potentially showing up and slowly getting bigger. I think of the Tails version where the player can see the limo. Like, what is that? Why is it getting closer? I don't know why, but that sort of thing slowly getting bigger, it gets me. It really does. Maybe this all stems from my extreme paranoia, which I've been getting a lot better on as of recent, but it's always haunted my life. It's just odd that these moments cause me to freeze up on the inside. The kind of feeling that I could be in a room with other people, and it's like the color drains from those people, frozen in time. The only currently existing thing being just me and the game. And maybe in some ways, I kinda like that. Going hand in hand with this are glitches. Yeah, I know, glitches scare me. But before that, let's talk about how cool glitches are. Maybe nowadays there's a lot more of a negative connotation when it comes to glitches in games, like, oh, this game's glitched out. Maybe that's more like bugs, but back then, finding glitches to skip areas, open alternative play styles, and just discover new things was awesome. Just looking at videos on glitches and performing them myself, that stuff was like learning a magic trick. I think one of my favorites has to be the 007 Goldeneye being able to dual wield any combination of weapons. Like, that kicks ass. Or the Master Hand glitch in Super Smash Bros. Melee, being able to play as this boss character that normally wasn't allowed to be used in the player's hands. Y'all should look up the Peach percent glitch in Paper Mario 64. Now that is wild. And that's the kind of cool stuff that can only be opened up thanks to glitches. Alongside all the fun and unprecedented scenarios I could do with cheat devices. Like, I didn't use these to get infinite lives or something. I wanted to do things that would let me play the game in new ways. Start with certain weapons early, playing boss characters in fighting games. It made me get more out of video games, out of my favorite games. Like, the fun I had with stuff like the debug menu in the Smash Bros. Games was incredible. There was just something powerful about being able to change a game. I feel like games back then, with secrets and cheats, like how some games would have like moon jumps or infinite jumps as an unlockable code or something, just encouraged the player to break the game. Maybe nowadays this stuff is seen as bad and unprofessional, but who cares? These are video games. This is fun. Yeah, big head mode looks ugly as hell, but it's fun, funny, laugh, have fun. Like, dear God. Maybe this is boomer talk. But something about glitches in older games had a mystique to them. Like, the game was hiding things from the player, and being able to glitch in ways to discover these things was cool. Stuff like hidden, unused rooms lying outside boundaries, or accessing scenarios that were never meant to be seen by the player. Another layer to this is that games were also just more glitchy back then. Whether it be the lack of patches, the nicheness of games in the marketplace at the time, or of course the nature of early 3D games being a new concept and not fully understood by anyone. This, alongside things like cartridge tilting, disc scratches, and just how physical games were back then, rather than being husks made to download games. Everyone's copy of the game was different. Some were so messed up that they'd be encountering issues or running into data on the disc never meant to be accessed. Speedrun controversies over whether or not someone cheated, found a new skip, or just had a bad cartridge or console. I had a PS1 console that was so bad at reading discs that I had games where characters would just randomly start T-posing during animations. Like, the animation couldn't be loaded, so they just brought up a default animation. If y'all remember my Mystery Dungeon Iceberg video, I also think about Perfect Dark, and that one time on the grid level where this normally locked door was randomly wide open with nothing but a black abyss that I fell into and died. Which brings me to why this scares me. Glitches are spontaneous. They can happen anytime, and with my delusions, it brings a sort of sentience to the game. Like the game is fighting back, being hostile. Some of the worst glitches to me, which even though I find cool, are the ones that trigger my Void Sky thing. Is the ones involving glitching through the world. Like, yeah, this actually messes with me. Like when I no clip out of bounds into another world, I feel like there may be another entity here with me, like I've just entered a different game. What's worse is that usually the death barrier is down here too, so I die instantly. I remember some games like Super Mario Sunshine was nasty, because the player could still live for a few seconds before they died, though they could live forever by jumping. But just being in this plane made me feel weird. I remember I used to glitch out one of the old Call of Duty games. There was like hidden geometry that you could just fall under and live. And god, it was just so weird. Like sure, when this happens I'll laugh it off, like oops, game's messing up. Glitches, oddities, bugs. Maybe it's because I make games, but I can't roast them too hard for this stuff. I think it's funny. But even though it's cool, when stuff like this happens, in the back of my mind, there's always that frozen, scared person. Teleports me back to a time that I can't even remember anymore. Speaking of games breaking, another thing that gets to me are crashes. I don't do well around loud sounds at all, and games just randomly freezing and screeching at me, that hurts me. I used to mod Brawl back then. That shit changed me. I remember gaming on my super small TV, playing SNES games and the like, and just suddenly I see a graphic that's incorrect, or the sound becomes loud piercing notes, and at that point it's just inevitable, it's gonna crash. Whenever I start breaking older games on consoles, or they just start glitching out, I always get that sort of jump scare anticipation of waiting for the game to crash, preemptively lowering the volume and stuff. Like I'm messing with the game, and it's gonna start freaking out. This sort of personification of a video game as real beings through my life of using them to escape has kind of led me to see these video games as friends. Yes, I'm aware that's silly, but arguably it's less silly than seeing a corporation as a friend and defending them. Y'all can suck off Nintendo while I go and make out with my copy of Pokémon Mystery Dungeon, Explorers of Sky. Now that's what I call foreshadowing. But it's this kind of relationship that, for a time, really made me like creepypastas for video games. As corny and played out as they are, I feel like they come from the same space as hoaxes. Just these people telling these stories like, wouldn't it be wild if this happened when I played this game? And a lot of the times, they do kind of personify the game as this sort of malevolent being seeking to harm the player. It's author versus video game. I feel almost a sort of connection with these people and these stories in that sense. Like maybe we grew up seeing games as the same thing, and for some of these stories, there's definitely a passion and appreciation for the idea of how mysterious games can be. The famously known Ben Drowned was really cool for showing video evidence of the game glitching out. I feel like it's a shared idea for some of us that when we play video games, we aren't alone. And even if these stories are known for being silly and trash, there's always a part of me knowing that would still get kind of shook at them. Just the idea of it being real, these video games being some sort of godlike evil beings, seeing games mess up and glitch in ways that can almost be believed. Which is why I'm so fascinated with the ideal of the whole every copy of Mario 64 is personalized, and the idea of a personalized game. Whether it be our bad memory, or just how glitchy these games could be, potentially tailoring a unique experience for everyone. Like I said earlier, imagine my copy of Perfect Dark on Nintendo 64 if the elevator door in the grid map was always open. One day I'll look up footage or talk to someone about the game, and they'll bring up the weird locked door in grid, and I'll be like, no, that door was unlocked for me. Which is why I feel like there's some truth to this. Games were different between people. I've had conversations like that where we talk about a game that we haven't played for years, and we both remember contradicting things. So I'm not surprised when that happens, or theories on that can occur. But of course it could just be bad memory, am I right? Even though emulators and ROMs kinda lose that experience, someone dumping their ROMs and uploading them is like sharing their copy of the game, their experience. And some games are sorta personalized, maybe not entirely based on the person playing it, but maybe their gameplay choices, what characters to use in an RPG, or games with heavy RNG factors, or multiple scenarios the players don't even realize. I was thinking of what it'd be like to make a game a personalized experience myself, and I thought of either one of two things. One is of course a game with a quote-unquote seed that results in a slightly different game for everyone, which is kind of what I'm doing with Silence and his random emotions and bot sound. Then on the other hand, what about a game that I slightly tweak several times and release in a way that I privately send a slightly tweaked copy to everyone who asks, making each copy a legit different experience? Think of like version differences and updates to discs and cartridges. Like, hey, wasn't it weird that Suikoden 2 had a lot of garbled dialogue and moments where just no music would play, and the person you're talking to is like, oh, you must be American. Or censored things between game versions are enough to make games different. It helps dilute the experience farther with the already aforementioned consoles and cartridges. Every cartridge was personalized, compared to games nowadays where we just download a static one from a server. Note that I said I'd like to make a game resulting in a personalized experience. This is different from a personalized game, I believe. The theory on a personalized games, from what I've heard, is partly based on the person playing them personally, like a game that reflects and changes based off the person and who they are. That's a bit to seeing games as physical beings that can read minds and know about my entire life for me to take too seriously. But I can see games that change subtly depending on player actions and how they react in a game, a personal study of their in-game avatar. I think of something like Silent Hill 2, with its endings involving the actions that players take, whether they read or look at certain objects in the world or inventory items, how often they heal, the damage they are dealt, how they treat a certain companion character following them. I think that stuff is interesting, but once it gets studied down, the code is opened, then all that becomes static. The experience is solved, it's understood. Even with random events, that all will be seen as well. It all becomes static once the game is cracked open and everything can be turned into simple numbers. Which is why I think cartridges will always hold a bit of that mysterious charm, that a lot of people do report these once-in-a-lifetime events that people looking at the game can attempt to disprove, but those people are looking at their copy of the game. With how cartridges can potentially garble and change this, then in a lot of ways, anything can be possible in these old games. Take that, science users. But I guess this leads me to my final topic. Why aren't video games mysterious anymore? Are weird things still being found about games? And are there still video games out there that are mysterious? So, let's talk. Things are gonna get subjective and just based off my thoughts. This is a very wide topic. So, I guess when it comes to my thoughts and perspective, I'm on the internet, so I naturally see new games before they come out. I get spoiled by people and I see screenshots or trailers. That ruins a bit of the mystique to me. And it's a lot more common with bigger games. This wouldn't matter to people who didn't know anything about the new games coming out and they just buy whatever, like, oh, there's a new Kashmako game out? Didn't even know. But maybe it's just how content is treated in certain video games nowadays. it's idealized that the player has to see everything. Potentially missable content is just that, potentially missable. It's extra stuff. Time and resources spent in creating something that won't be part of the experience for some people. And the more of that there is, and when money and consumerism get put on the line, workers working on optional content? That's a miss, I'd assume. Games need to be linear, clear, clean, similar experiences. And if there's any extra stuff, don't spend too much time on it. Not saying they're all like this. Open world games are popular, but there's also a lot of open world games that are known to be pretty shallow with the content. Modern, popular games are also prone to being data mined, have all its secrets revealed online. Yet I feel like when it comes to older games, people are still finding things out. There are things still missing in those games waiting to be discovered. The older I get, the more I miss just sitting down with a cartridge for a game I've never heard of and just putting it in. Like, Donkey Kong Country? I wonder what kind of game that is. Only one way to find out. And maybe it's my fault, but with my time, I'd probably just look up what these games play like to see if it looked like something I would like. Which I feel like probably limits a lot of genre exploration and people potentially missing things that they would like, just because they don't want to try it. I don't know if this is a shared feeling, but modern games kind of just all feel the same to me. Yeah, there are some unique ones, I won't deny that. But I feel like they just set out to give a satisfying experience and nothing else. Nothing to make it memorable, nothing to make it unique or stand out. Just a roller coaster ride that feels like other ones I've ridden. And now it's just time to wait for the next ride to come out? That's not me. The ideas of secret content may still be there. Sometimes it just feels like the game was made to show me everything it had. So now there's nothing left but to wait for the DLC or wait for the next big game. How predictable. There can never be things like unlocking Sonic in Super Smash Bros. Melee, because that game already had the experience of me doing all sorts of random things to unlock characters. That's the mystery. And of course now I would just look that stuff up. The only real mystery, I guess, is fake leaks. Like when somebody leaks something, is it real? Is it fake? And I don't know, that's kind of a sad state of games, isn't it? But I do think there are games still being released that can still spark my hunger for mystery, that can take me back. Games where I can't just look up things. Compare the latest Super Mario or Call of Duty game to something like Saturn Quest. Yeah, baby. Indie games. I think the game changes when it comes to that. Indie games don't need to have rules. They don't have to follow strict guidelines on how a game should be made in order to make the most money. And for some of them, they're kind of made with the idea that a lot of people won't like them. Hello. There's just something more exciting going onto some random ass site to download a game nobody has ever heard of before, compared to going to a store page and buying a world-renowned game. It's exciting to know that many of the games I've covered could be hiding some massive secrets, things I actually may never find out about. With a lot of indie games, I can't just type it in on YouTube to find videos of things I missed, because often enough, there aren't any videos on the game. It makes my playthrough so much more fruitful when I know I can be discovering stuff potentially nobody has. Like, yeah, I'm going to have to reload my save if I want to experience and see the other endings for myself in some of these games, because I know if I looked it up, there would be no videos on the other endings. It makes me want to try more. It makes me want to go back into the game and see what I missed, because there's just no easy access to information. There's not some wiki with everything documented for me to understand. And maybe that's just a sad sign of internet ruling my worldview, that my value is sought from knowledge of other people and their playings of the game, rather than just enjoying something on my own. I don't like that. But some of the most interesting and world-changing games I've played are indie games, where I'm like, this could never be released on a major console. I feel like new, big games, for the most part, are too safe, too afraid to be controversial, and too dependent on getting good sales and reviews to branch out to being mysterious, being fresh, unique. Once again, there are exceptions, but indie games are when someone has the power to do anything. And that's resulted in some of the wildest games I've ever played. Maybe this doesn't make sense, maybe none of it does, but maybe it doesn't have to. I don't make sense. To a lot of people who have made it this far, I've painted a worldview so strange that I'd imagine most people wouldn't understand me and how I see media. But there is a part of me that will cut the whimsy and be a bit more honest. Video games aren't as mysterious anymore because we grew up. Games are no longer these mythical beings of infinite possibilities. Maybe this sounds funny if y'all see me as delusional, but I am a game dev, baby. I know making games are hard, it takes time, and it's not often I run into games with the effort to surprise me, but when I do, it's usually indie games. Maybe it doesn't make sense, maybe it's completely illogical, but it's my worldview, built from my past experiences and emotions. And playing these little known indie games, it makes me feel young again, without the bad parts of it. It gives me that spark of when every game I played felt vastly different from one another. Unique ideas were everywhere, esoteric game design that made me question what the next game I'd play would be like. That's what I live for. Underlying secrets that are still being discovered, talked about to this day, or left buried, never to be found. Back when genres felt more like vague suggestions, when teams behind games were so small, they basically were indie games. Secrets and Easter eggs everywhere, games bound between unpopular and inaccessible controls leading to mysterious obscurity. When games were cool, new, niche, special. Not sitting at some gaming show waiting for the next reveal in a franchise recycling the same type of game. It's me swimming out in the deep water to discover absolute messes of a game that I'll sure as hell remember more than any of the next big games of the following years. Games with the vibe, style, and heart to lead me to questioning more. Games so unknown that I have to make videos on them just to try and stir up any discussion with them. When I think about the games that make me want to make games myself, it's these small passionate projects. And it's with these unknown games especially, when I run into something odd, when I question or see something, I'll potentially go the rest of my life never knowing if someone shared the same experience as I did. If there's more aspects to a game I look at that I'll never be able to know about. That's the kind of mystery that keeps me alive nowadays. I can accept the days of hoaxes are gone, that meaningful secrets and missable content in big games are a lot lesser nowadays. But there are, and always will be, games where I can once again look into that blue void, these empty, off-putting areas, where I can see a reflection of that kid I once was, staring back with curiosity. It's nice to see you again.